Well, let's start though with that row over Jeremy Corbyn's suspension from the Labour Party. Lots of texts on this one, lots on social media. This is the party he used to lead. This is the party of which he was an absolute hero. This is the man at Glastonbury. Remember all that. Well, he rejected and the mass membership which flocked to the party because of him. He's been suspended from the Labour Party. Now, he rejected part of yesterday's very critical report over how the party handled anti-Semitism allegations under his leadership, and he's out for now. And the unions aren't happy, Claire, are they?
No, they're not. Len McCluskey, head of the Unite Union, which is Labour's biggest donor, of course, says it's a grave injustice, his suspension. The report says the party, though, was responsible for unlawful harassment and discrimination. And we're going to be speaking to the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, just before 8 o'clock this morning.
We've got Laura Beera-Nielsen, former Director of Policy and Research at Labour Leave, who is, I think, happy with the suspension. Good morning, Laura.
Good morning.
Hi, and Ashok Kumar, Lecturer of International Political Economy at Birkbeck College, London, University of London. Jeremy Corbyn fan, was a party member until Sir Keir Starmer was elected. Ashok, good morning.
Good morning.
Hi. Laura, why was this the right thing to do?
I mean, in my opinion, Jeremy Corbyn, it's irrefutable that he knew what was going on and that he did nothing in his power to stop it. I mean, it was very clear that the party acted decisively when it wanted to. In the case of sexual harassment, the report clearly states that there was fast action taken, decisive work by the party. But in the case of anti-Semitism, it didn't, which shows that it was a choice rather than he was unable to. In my opinion, Jeremy Corbyn, if he had any decency, he would recognise his culpability, which the report clearly shows, and would have resigned himself. I don't think it should have been left.
But it doesn't point to him, it points to the leader's office. Do you think there is any way in which this was exploited by his opponents within and without the party, because he had many? Laura?
Well, I mean, I do refute what you're saying. I mean, when you say it was the leader's office is led by the leader. And there was extensive political interference in this process, which there never should be. I mean, in a third of the cases that they looked at, the leader's office was involved and made decisions based on politics rather on the morals of the case. It's completely unacceptable. And no, I mean, if it's, exploited for political gains by their opposition, that happens on a daily basis, whatever the issue. But no, I don't think it's exaggerated. And I think for him to say that it was dramatically overstated is to completely undermine what Jewish members of the Labour Party went through for 5 years. And it's disgraceful.
And Ashok Kumar, there are many people on the left, as we know, who winced when he made that statement so soon after the report came out. It was, they're not yet saying that in public, but it was excruciating, wasn't it?
Firstly, I'd encourage Laura to actually read the report.
I have done. I've read the whole 130 pages.
Yes, I would encourage you to read it thoroughly, because what it demonstrates is that, what it demonstrates is that there are only 2 legally actionable cases, and it failed to find the Labour Party institutionally anti-Semitic, which the JLM had insisted for the last 5 years. And also what Jeremy Corbyn was speaking towards is saying dramatically overstated, because there's surveys after surveys. Just last year's Survation poll that found a majority of the country thought that a third of the Labour Party had gone through disciplinary action for anti-Semitism, when what the report found is that it was less than a third of 1%.
This is racism in the Labour Party. Answer the question, Ashok, please. Did you not wince when he made this? Well, you're not.
No, not
Did you not make this? Well, the question was, let me put the question to you again, just to remind you.
Okay.
When he made that statement so soon after this report from a body that was set up by the Labour Party, came out talking about racism within the party, and he said within hours of it being released that it was overblown and exaggerated, was at the very least that...
He didn't say overblown and exaggerated. He recognized that anti-Semitism had been a problem in the party, and then he also recognized that there was a clear disjuncture, which is stated in the report, between public perceptions and some in the media that had dramatically overblown it. How do you explain the disjuncture between public perceptions of how deep and widespread anti-Semitism was within the Labour Party and the actual evidence, the preponderance of evidence that shows that it was still extremely extremely marginal, less than a third of 1%.
Okay, can I just ask you a question, Ashok? If there were so few complaints, as you say, which I do dispute because the report shows a massive amount of bad record keeping, etc. Excuse me, sorry. Can I just finish my question?
Sorry, Laura, two legally actionable cases.
Can I ask you to let Laura finish her question?
Thank you.
Please.
If there were so few complaints, how did Corbyn fail to deal with it so abysmally? And to me, it implies it was a choice. I mean, if there were so few, like you're saying, how did it come into such a massive issue where they weren't? The Jewish community felt abandoned.
The leaked documents demonstrated only a few months ago that the Corbyn leadership were desperate to try to respond to those cases. They actually wanted to rush both of those two cases through. I mean, I would encourage you to read those leaked documents. Senior members within the party who are antagonistic to the goals of Corbyn and their supporters undermine that process along the way. That's not conspiracy. That is what the evidence conspiracy.
But then what you're saying, what your argument is that the EHRC, which the Labour Party enforced as an organisation, is almost sort of conspiring with everyone else to try and undermine Jeremy Corbyn.
No, I'm saying the leaked documents show that even when the cases were coming in, the leadership's office was trying to push for it to be expedited. That process has been undermined along the way in order to show the leadership as incompetent. That came out in the leaked document.
Jeremy Corbyn Jeremy Corbyn clearly stated that it was dramatically overstated, this report.
And I'll tell you,
Listen, both of you. Let's just hang on. Wait, no, Ashok, wait. I'm just going to have a little bit of calm, and then I'm going to ask you both a question, a broader question. I'll ask you one, Ashok. What about Jeremy Corbyn's attitude, his blind spot to this over the years? Sharing platforms with Holocaust deniers, campaigning for the Islamic cleric who said that is reported to have said that Jews drink the blood of Christian children. I mean, if this had been somebody sharing a platform with the Ku Klux Klan, people who supported Jeremy Corbyn would have demanded that this man was not the leader of their party. And yet, why was it acceptable for him to share a platform with these fascists?
That is so outrageous. He's a lifelong anti-racist campaigner.
Why share a platform with Holocaust deniers?
You've asked me a question now. I'll try to answer it. He's shared platforms with thousands of people. He stood in solidarity with anti-apartheid regime when the Tory party and other people were supporting apartheid. Jonathan Ashford came on to this the most shameful event in Labour history. The Labour Party was complicit in active participation in colonialism. This was more shameful than that. Supported the Iraq War that killed 1 million people. The Tory Party week after week has people taking pictures with active Nazis. I mean, the idea that this isn't a political attack, of course, Jeremy Corbyn has probably stood with people, amongst the thousands of people that he stood with, who have said
he campaigned for that particular Islamic cleric. All I'm saying is there is perhaps at best a level of naivety. Let me put one to you, Laura. Right, let's look at the people who are applauding this decision. The former Labour Home Secretary, Lord Blunkett, a Blairite. The defining characteristic of any powerful leader is to see when a line can be drawn and a very clear message can be sent to the electorate. Lord Mandelson, the very architect of New Labour. The reality is that Corbyn now belongs to the past, and that is how it is going to stay. This is the Empire Strikes Back. This is the Blairite charge, isn't it, Laura?
I think that's an unreasonable characterisation, because what you would be implying then is that it's the EHRC. It wasn't Lord Blunkett or Peter Mandelson who wrote that report or investigated it for 18 months. It was the Independent Equalities and Human Rights Commission.
It wasn't the EHRC who suspended Jeremy Corbyn.
No, absolutely. But I mean, in my opinion, like I said, he should have resigned. I mean, when a report comes back and points to a culture, which is a quote, points to a culture within the party, which at best did not do enough to prevent anti-Semitism, and at worst could be seen to accept it, how he could not accept full culpability for that when it all points towards the leadership's office is absolutely astonishing. People might be rejoicing, political opponents. That's inevitable in any of these situations, but they're not the ones who came forward and put the report. That was an independent inquiry.
Thank you both so much. Ashok Kumar, lecturer of international political economy at Birkbeck College, University of London. And Laura, thanks to you too. Laura Beer-O'Neill.